It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, how are we feeling?
You know, we've been having a little technical difficulties here getting this going. And so I didn't want to hit the button to play the sound because I'm afraid of touching anything right now. Finally just got it working. I got no theme music today. I'm kind of bummed. Also, I needed that because, like, I feel like right now I am the sort of like kid sliding down the wall because they're so exhausted with the frequency of news today. There's just been a whole bunch. There's been a whole lot.
Yeah, Tomlin Tuesday has turned into a lot more than just Tomlin Tuesday. Typically, we're able to get on here and just, all right, let's talk about maybe some roster moves, if there was any injuries from the previous day, anything that Tomlin might say. Obviously, with the quarterback situation, that's been brought up a ton. But yeah, there was about 60 pieces of news thrown our way. A big one that we're going to get into later in the show. We want to talk about Davante Adams a lot more. But yeah, Alan, so it sounds like your Tuesday's at least going probably a little bit better than maybe the Raiders front office, but also probably just as hectic.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Maybe not quite just as hectic, but yeah, pretty hectic.
Man,
who is the Raiders GM? I don't even know.
Telesco came over from the Chargers.
Oh, right. That's right. Yeah, brand new. So he did not sign that deal. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll dive into that more later in the show. That'll be a good chunk of this podcast. But I want to go through some of the stuff, the roster moves, anything that Tomlin might have said that caught your ear as well. But we'll start with the roster moves. From the 53-man roster wave, Jalen, Elliott, and Darius Rush, who, you know, in the spring was ahead of Corey Trice, maybe thought he could be that, you know, a primary backup on the boundary. But if you're a backup cornerback and you don't carve out a role for special teams, your time will not be long here. So Darius Rush no longer a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, not like super surprising. I mean, he was a guy I kind of thought like during roster cuts was right on the line.
Right.
And so, and anybody like that, you know, you kind of know that like if they feel like they need the spot for something, they could go. And so not surprised in that regard, has been a healthy scratch the last two games, lost that special team spot to James Pierre. And I think the difference was pretty clear as soon as Pierre got back to Pittsburgh. You saw the difference in their abilities in terms of a punt gunner specifically was pretty dramatic. James Pierre has been outstanding the last two games as a punt gunner, way better than anything that had before that. And I think that's why he's keeping that roster spot. It is a little curious to me. Rush is a guy that I think they liked. I think they thought he was a potential future piece for them. And to release him while Corey Trice is on the injured reserve list is certainly a bold move. You're putting a lot of faith in James Pierre if something were to happen to either Joey Porter Jr. and Dante Jackson. And we know Dante Jackson is playing at less than 100% after spraining his shoulder. So it's interesting. I would imagine that their fingers that get away practice squad. That would be my guess because I think he's a player that they still have a lot of hope for and faith in. It's also interesting that the two 53-man cuts, Rush and Jaylen Elliott, come without any noted replacement, as you so tactfully put on Twitter.
Sorry, I didn't mean to ratio you like that, but
have the two open roster spots on the 53 right now after releasing Rush and Jaylen Elliott. Elliott, I mean, pretty much we know he's just a special teamer at this point. Thought he'd been an okay special teamer, but, you know, guys like that are generally always at risk. But, yeah, two open spots. So I guess they could make a wide receiver move or something like that.
They absolutely could. We'll get, maybe Andy Isabella, who they worked out today. No, but it's funny because I even posted. Has anybody seen Andy Isabella and Scott Miller in the same room ever? Because I see a lot of parallels in what they bring to the table. But Andy Isabella had not been able to carve out an NFL role for himself, despite being a former second-round pick in a very good draft class, by the way, for receivers. That 2019 class, he went ahead of some really good players, and he has not carved out an NFL role for himself.
Andy Isabella, the protege of former Pitt offensive coordinator Mark Whipple. Whipple was the head coach at UMass when Andy Isabella was there.
That's right.
And so I interviewed Isabella at the Combine because Whipple had just come to Pitt. I guess that was his first season at Pitt that year, that 19 year that Isabella was coming out of the draft. Really nice guy. Fast as all get out. Small. The Steelers have three. Steelers would have like the three smallest wide receivers in the NFL, I think, if they signed Andy Isabella to go with Scotty Miller and Calvin Austin III. I don't really understand what you're hoping to get with that move, but we'll see.
Right.
I think it's much more likely that those two open roster spots are going to go to guys that are coming back from injury. I asked Mike Tomlin at his press conference about getting guys back. They have 3 players that are eligible to come back off the injured reserve list this week, and 1 more off the PUP list. That is defensive lineman Logan Lee. That is outside linebacker Jeremiah Moon, tackle Dylan Cook, and linebacker Cole Holcomb. And I think it's pretty likely that we're going to see, at the very least, Moon elevated or activated from the injured reserve this week. The Steelers actually put him on their depth chart, which they don't usually do for players on the IR. So I think you're going to see Moon back this week. Dylan Cook, I think, is still a week or 2 away, but he could certainly start to practice this week. And I don't really know about how far Cole Holcomb is, but Mike Tomlin certainly talked about him for the first time like a player that is a part of the team's current plan when he was asked about him in a way that I have not. Generally when it's like a player that's like far away, Tomlin is very vague and says, who knows what'll happen between now and then, whatever. We'll deal with that when we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And it was very much talking like a coach who was about to have Cole Holcomb as a part of his game plan, which I thought was a notable change. So I don't know if Logan Lee would even be in the rotation if he got healthy right now. Probably not. But the other 3, I mean, with Moon, like they really need that depth at outside linebacker. An inside linebacker, I don't think they need the depth, but it would certainly if you get a player of the caliber of Cole Holcomb available to you, you're going to take that. And then, offensive tackle. I mean, I think they would love to have Dylan Cook available as soon as he's ready. I just think it's going to be a little bit more time as he recovers from that Liz Frank injury.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, somebody just asked us about Jeremiah Moon in the post game on Sunday, and we weren't sure. You said all that you've really been able to say is he's been running. So, we'll see. But that definitely, him being added to the depth chart would signify that he's pretty close. Some other stuff to go through here. Jack Toledo and Marcus Haynes released from the practice squad. I don't know. I hope I don't butcher this. Eku Leotu, is that the outside linebacker that was added to the practice squad?
Yes. Iku, I don't know if it's Iku or Iku, I think.
Iku Leota. Okay. And LaMichael Pirine back as well to the practice squad, adding another running back to the practice squad. Obviously, they've been dealing with some injuries in that room, which we can bring up right now. Max Scharping added to the 53-man roster, right? A guy that has actually a decent amount of starts under his belt at guard. He can move around the offensive line a little bit. Former second-round pick of the Houston Texans, also played, got some starts with the Cincinnati Bengals when they lost Alex Kappa on that run there. So Max Scharping, definitely a guy that's been around the block and brings NFL experience to that offensive line, which they definitely need the depth there. But yeah, the injuries that I wanted to bring up certainly sounds like we thought it could happen last week. Isaac Seumalo got in 3 limited practices, but certainly sounds like now with the way Tomlin talked about him that it will be this week, Sunday Night Football against Dallas, that we do see Isaac Seumalo return.
Yeah, I think you're going to see Seumalo return. I think you'll see Mason McCormick start at right guard, although Tomlin did leave open the possibility of there being a rotation between him and Spencer Anderson. I do think you're going to see McCormick start, and then you have Scharping as one backup, and Calvin Anderson is the other, and there's your 8 offensive linemen. Scharping can play. He's played left tackle. He's played center. I assume he could play right tackle. So he's a pretty versatile backup himself, although he's primarily a guard. and a pretty good one. I mean, I got to say, that's some pretty.
Yeah, I think they do a lot worse at this
acquisition.
juncture.
Yeah, pretty solid backup acquisition for this stage of the calendar. And then Michael Pirine, that gives them 3 running backs on the practice squad. I know that Mike Tomlin said that there's a chance that Jaylen Warren and Cordarrelle Patterson are going to play this week, but 3 running backs on the practice squad does not give me a whole lot of faith, especially with, Najee Harris. Don't believe that he's 100%, has been giving time off during practice for the first time in his career. You remember Najee Harris's second year when, he played the whole first half of the season, then he came out, week 8 or something, was like, yeah, I was playing with a steel plate in my shoe. I feel like we're headed for something similar to that with Harris this year, where, he is just clearly not 100% right now. And I feel like later on we're going to be like, oh, yeah, by the way, I don't know what, had gangrene in my armpit or I don't know, whatever. Some horrific malady is going to become reported about Najee Harris weeks from now. We're going to be like, oh, yeah, makes sense. Anyway, so, if he gets another Wednesday off, which I have no reason to suspect that he won't, and Patterson and Warren aren't healthy, you'd be talking about 3 practice squad running backs at practice tomorrow, being very realistic between Aaron Champlin, Jonathan Ward, and Michael Pirine. And I did not think Aaron Champlin covered himself in glory in his first NFL game. So I would consider that still very much an open competition if we're talking about one of those guys getting a helmet this week.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, if you're subbing out, even if it's just one, I think that I would go with Ward this week against Dallas and see what he can bring. I think he's got juice. I think he's an NFL back. So I'd like to see him get a shot. Pruitt is the other one that I wanted to add to that because Michael Pruitt, Jaylen Warren, Cordarrelle Patterson, Tomlin left the light on for to be able to return this week. We'll see about that. You mentioned Jaylen Warren seemed like even during practice last week, he was kind of just chomping at the bit, like he wanted to participate in the drills, but knew that he couldn't. We don't know what the extent of that injury is. We don't know what the extent of Cordarrelle Patterson's is, but it certainly, like you said, and I agreed with, didn't seem like it was just going to be a rest of game type of injury. I thought you were looking at a little bit of an absence there for Cordarrelle, and he still might be. But with him leaving the light on for him to return, we'll see what that looks like. And with the state of Najee, there's so much potential turnover, if you will, within this running back room, but there might be none. Who knows what's going to happen? It seems like there's just the variance of what it could be on Sunday to right now is very high.
Yeah, I think the chances of all 3 playing seem low. I was actually pretty surprised that Tomlin said that Patterson has a chance to play this week.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. Like I said, I agreed with you in post game and then on yesterday's afternoon drive that I thought it was going to be a little bit of an absence there for Cordarrelle just based off the way that it looked. The other thing that he mentioned in there, and maybe there's something else. Oh, should also mention that Alex Highsmith is out. I feel like that's not really news. He also said Daniels, but then Daniels was put on IR since anyway. So obviously we knew that his season was over. But Russ, it sounds like going to do a little bit more work this week. I guess we'll see what that entails. He didn't really lay out what that plan was though, right? Or did he?
No, he just said that Russ is going to do more. He said have a live pocket. So I assume that means he'll do some 11 on 11, which we've not really seen. He did run some scout team last week. So, there's that, but I haven't really seen him do any real Steelers offense stuff. Still just haven't seen the guy take a I got to see him run a little bit before I can feel good about him playing. My gut feeling is that this is a ramp up week and that on Friday, Mike Tomlin's going to tell us that Russell Wilson got close but was not healthy enough to play. And we're going to go one more week with status quo, and then next week will be kind of a week where somebody's going to have to make some kind of decision. Or maybe not. Who knows what happens.
Yeah, man, that's going to be very interesting. It hasn't been able to be much of a discussion because of Russ's health. But when it is, man, Steelers Twitter's going to be on fire. And that's what I look forward to, as well as this podcast, as well as the comments of this podcast. So I'm certainly looking forward to that aspect of things. Alan, you know what that could mean, though? Okay, so say it is Justin versus the Cowboys, assumingly here, and then maybe the next week it's a decision. That opponent, the Las Vegas Raiders. And guess what? we got another topic as it pertains to the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, it's not who's going to play quarterback for me either.
It is not.
It's not the health of Max. It's not the health of Max Crosby, who, by the way, did not play last week.
Oh, that's right. He didn't play as well as this player. Davante Adams, the wide receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders. It's been a weird situation. Like, didn't play last week due to a calf injury.
I thought it was a hamstring.
Was it calf? Or I'm sorry, hamstring. It was hamstring. It was hamstring. Right, yeah. You're right. Hamstring. Sorry, calf has been on my mind because of Russell Wilson. Basically, everybody that's injured has a calf injury in my mind.
All right, fair enough.
But yeah, Davante Adams has a hamstring injury. That's what he set out with. Was on the Up and Adams show today with Kay Adams talking about it. Was asked about his coach liking an Instagram post, commenting about the fact that maybe he would be traded. He knew nothing about it, hadn't talked to his coach, said he hadn't talked to anybody in the front office. Was asked what the next steps are, kind of said, I don't know, I'm just doing my own thing. It's kind of an awkward conversation there for a bit. And then like shortly after, it comes out that he's told the Raiders that he prefers to be traded at this point. Davante Adams widely been involved in trade talks ever since getting to Vegas in a trade from the Green Bay Packers. And here we sit here. The Steelers still have not traded for a wide receiver. They contacted the Raiders, as I'm sure a lot of teams did, and Omar would contacted every team that has a receiver in the summer. Could they circle back? Do we expect this to happen? Not the trade to happen, but for the Steelers to circle back.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure that's already happened. In fact, I'm sure that the Raiders reach out to the Steelers first. So this whole situation is kind of bizarre. So 2 weeks ago, after the Raiders lost to the Carolina Panthers, head coach Antonio Pierce called out his players for dogging it, basically, in the postgame, and said some players made some business decisions, and we're going to make some business decisions. And then out of nowhere after that, Davante Adams comes up with a hamstring injury, and then they won last week without Davante Adams, beat the Browns, and now his coach is liking a post on Instagram that says he's played his last game. The coach is not talking to the player about having done that, not talking to the player at all. And it's weird that Adams was even on Kay Adams. Why do they have to both be Adams? Show, who is hurt, can't play, and then goes on a talk show. That's not the way that usually works. Okay, usually,
I don't know. In 2024, I feel like it is the way that works.
If you're hurt enough that you can't play, you're not the one out there in the media circuit. I don't know. And then it comes out first after that the Raiders are actively shopping Davante Adams. Then, in very short order, that Davante Adams would prefer to be traded. Then Schefter has, the Raiders would take a second-round pick plus for Davante Adams, which means they'll actually take a lot less than that because, nobody announces what they'll actually take. They announce what they hope they can get. So, yeah.
Yes. What I'm hearing is probably a third-ish.
I would think the Raiders would be relatively tickled about a third-round pick. Here's what I'll say. I think it is near 100% that Davante Adams is going to be traded at this point. You don't add up that sequence of events to any other resolution. The real question is, things are clearly pretty toxic with the Raiders. The Steelers are very clearly interested. The other team that's going to be interested is the Kansas City Chiefs. Davante Adams is a really good player. I assume others are going to be interested too. But the Chiefs, who have had wide receiver problems since forever, and just had Rashee Rice get injured, would certainly love to have Davante Adams. If you're the Raiders, how do you pick between trading him in the division and trading him to a team that you're going to play in 2 weeks? Are things tenable enough that they could wait the 2 weeks to trade him to the Steelers on October 14th?
Yeah, right.
I don't know. It's very strange. Or do they send him somewhere else? I mean, I
Back
assume
with
there are
Rodgers with the Jets.
maybe, yeah. I mean, I guess that's plausible.
Baltimore.
Yeah, maybe the Rams have Puka Nakua's on IR. They could use some help. I just don't know. And then the other part of this that's very interesting to me is Jonathan Jones of CBS reported that the Raiders are going to let Adams talk to teams that are doing his contract. So he was owed like $16.8 million this year. Right now he's owed $13 million for the rest of the year. That's fine. There's nobody's going to have a problem with. Well, I mean, as long as the team can make the cap space, nobody's going to have a problem with paying Davante Adams $13 million for the rest of the season. But his contract calls for a salary of $35.6 million in each of the next 2 seasons. But none of that money is guaranteed. And so, like, it's like monopoly money at this point. Like, he ain't getting that. He's not that player at this stage of his career. He's already 31 years old. He's clearly on the downhill. What he would be worth on the open market, I can't exactly say, but I'm sure it ain't that. Okay, and so I think that really now, like, me saying I think the Raiders would be tickled to get a 3rd-round pick is because I am operating under the assumption that anybody that acquires him is just going to have to cut him after this season because that contract is untenable. But if they're going to let a team work out a deal, then maybe it would be maybe they could get a little bit more for him if that new team is able to work out a new contract for Davante Adams that is, sort of in line with his current and projected future ability and not, I don't know, like, leave it to the Raiders to sign that deal in the first place because what the heck? I don't know.
Yeah, for his age, 32 and 33 seasons, making that much money. That's
yeah, I just thought, what were you thinking there? I don't know.
Who knows? Yeah, I mean, I guess I really didn't dive into the contract specifics when he first got to Vegas, but that's really bad on the back end. As far as a fit, what do you make of it? Because we talked about, I mean, I think at this point you're just looking for good players, especially when you look at the Steelers wide receiver room, the lack of talent that is within it. But, like, ideally, is this the type of receiver that you're adding to the room from what they asked of their guys schematically?
I think we're so far from ideally that, like, it doesn't matter.
Right. That's why I preface.
The guy who's walking to work is not turning down a red car of a blue one. I mean, that's where the Steelers are right now with their wide receiver room.
What a great comparison.
I think he's a pretty good fit for what they need, though, in general. He can take Van Jefferson's role in this offense immediately and be like 1,000,000% better at it. Is he a culture fit for George Pickens? I know that's been a concern. I have no idea. Again, I don't think the Steelers are in a position to be picky. And I think this, I think a lot of people are trying to make this more than it is. I don't think trading for Davante Adams says anything about the Steelers or where they think they are in their rebuild, other than this is a team that really needs to have better wide receivers than it has, and he's a good wide receiver. If you trade a 3rd-round pick for him, it just means that you got a better wide receiver than the one you had. And it doesn't mean they're like chasing a Super Bowl down all of a sudden. It doesn't mean they're going all in on this season. It just means he's a good player. They need more good players than they have, and they went out and got one. They really needed more good players than they have 3 months ago. But, I think we talked a lot, obviously, during the Brandon Ayuk saga about, I feel like Omar misread the wide receiver market. And honestly, if they can make this deal happen in 2 weeks, that's way better than, the trade deadline's all the way to November 4th. So this could go on a month with Adams or with other targets. If they could get Davante Adams on October 14th, that'd be about as good as the Steelers could hope for from here on out.
A 3rd-round pick for him, assuming you're not doing anything with the contract and it was just you're getting him for the rest of the season. Is that, you think, a trade worth making?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, but I've seen people on Twitter say that they wouldn't do it without knowing that he was going to be here longer because they don't feel like this team's going to win the Super Bowl when they don't want to give up a day 2 pick just for players to be here the rest of the year.
I don't think this team's going to be a Super Bowl contender, even with Davante Adams, but I think a third-round pick is worth the player. Like, it just is, And while I don't think they're going to contend for a Super Bowl, this is a team that has made it very clear that their goal this year is to win a playoff game, and that they have taken unusual steps to put themselves in a position to win a playoff game. And I think trading for Davante Adams helps them reach that goal. I don't the Steelers are telling us they want to win a playoff game. They're not telling us that they're a Super Bowl team. They aren't. We know that because we know they aren't. But there's layers to this. And I think the other part of it is, if you're the other reason I think this makes it worthwhile, my conversation on Twitter this morning was, everybody wants the Steelers to, and spinning off our conversation yesterday here, everybody wants the Steelers to open up the playbook and throw, let Justin Fields throw more. And the obvious answer to that is, to who? To who? You are not going to open up the playbook more with Van Jefferson and Scotty Miller. You're just not. And so if there is a thought in the Steelers of, hey, this Justin Fields guy might actually be really good, they are never going to know the answer to that question with the current talent level at wide receiver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Davante Adams, by the way, one of my favorite non-Steelers of all time. I've always loved his game. Thought he was super underrated coming out of Fresno State. Loved him as a Packer. Obviously hasn't been as productive with the Raiders, but I think if you watch him, still a very good player. And I think that the one thing that I still appreciate about his game, even though he is, now in his 30s, is how fast he gets open. And I think that when you talk about this offense, what they need, a patchwork offensive line, getting the ball out of Justin's hands quicker, I think that's a guy that would make his life super easy. Just that is going to be open quick, what he can do in the short and intermediate areas of the field. So I think that's kind of just like a security blanket, and the way that a lot of people look at the tight ends as a team security blanket. I think when you have a guy like Davante that gets open so quick within his routes, I think that could be a guy that Justin could rely on early and often.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a nice compliment. Like, it's not duplicative of anything that they have right now. They don't have anyone like that. And that's why it's a good fit. But again, I think a player of that caliber would be a good fit even if they weren't a good fit. But I do think he is a good fit.
Right. Yeah. This is also very important, but I had to look this up to make sure that this was the case. Him and George Pickens follow each other on Instagram. I mean, that's huge.
Big if true.
That is the only Steeler that he follows right now, by the way, though. Davante Adams. So make of that what you will.
That's a little interesting.
I don't know. Yeah, George Pickens is the only Steeler that Davante Adams follows right now.
All right.
There's some that follow him.
Also, the other thing I want to say here is that, I had lots of people ask me, would they trade Russell Wilson for him? No. This is trading for a wide receiver has zero to do with the Steelers quarterback situation, which is going to remain the two quarterbacks they have unless one of them wants out badly. They're not going to willingly trade Russell Wilson.
Right. Yeah. I saw people say the same thing, whether it was obviously last night we saw the Miami Dolphins try to play offense again. And it didn't go so well. So people were mentioning Russell Wilson for them, or now with Vegas, because Vegas was a team that apparently was trying to meet with Russell Wilson this offseason. But yeah, unless one of them are trying to force their way out of Pittsburgh, it ain't happening.
Certainly not to another potential AFC playoff team. That's the other part of this. The Raiders are 2-2. They're in second. They're tied for second place in their division right now. They're not just gonna I think they will trade Davante Adams, but they're not just gonna fire him off to the first team that comes calling tomorrow just because. I think there's gonna be there's got to be some tact to this. They're gonna sell tickets.
Absolutely. Anything else on this or anything?
Gosh, I feel like there's so much that we couldn't have possibly gotten to it all.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about all the injury stuff from Tomlin. Was there anything else that he mentioned?
I guess him kind of going off on the officiating about the
Oh, yeah.
Fitzpatrick penalty is noteworthy. Said that he talked to the league office and they said they didn't like the hit. I still think it's going to get called more often than not when you hit somebody that hard, that far after the play. Whether you go back and look at it in slow-mo and you see whether he hit him in the head or not, I think it's just a play that's going to get called. But I thought he gave a really good answer about, like, you can't let that, define your mindset. The Steelers had lots of opportunities to win that game after that penalty, and they were unable to. And, I thought that was a good answer.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, you know the drill, Alan. Tell people they'd find you.
At @Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, and TikTok. PGH Steelers Now, the site's account, SteelersNow.com. Go there and read the word so I can get paid. Use promo code Allen10 to get 10% off an annual subscription to SN Plus, where you get all the best stories from myself, Derek Bell, and also an ad-free reading experience for the entirety of our sites, plus
That's important.
Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Pittsburgh Baseball Now, and all the best stuff from John Parado and Dan Kingerski. And also, like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel. Go check out my other podcast, Steelers Morning Rush, where I broke down the Steelers spot drop cover 3 this morning and got the whiteboard out.
The whiteboard came back out. Yep.
Whiteboard came out.
I know the people love when that happens.
The people do love the whiteboards. They do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough it's a balancing act, right? Because you'd like to be able to put it in the backdrop and make it easier, like more accessible, more functionable, but at the same time, there's the credentials in the backdrop. Like, it's a tough balancing act. I feel like you don't want to take away from the credentials, but
so for years I've been planning to move the credentials to a different wall. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to move the credentials to a different wall, and then I'll have to have like Studio B, right, with the whiteboard. Like that's
yeah.
that's the long-term plan. There, we'll see how we can make that happen.
There we go. You're getting the blueprint right here on Steelers Afternoon Drive. Anyways, like Alan said, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you are here on YouTube. Also, hit us in the comments with any of your thoughts on anything that we talked about. If you want or think Davante Adams is going to become a Pittsburgh Steeler, drop that down below. Any questions for a future episode, leave us a 5-star.
I want to hear from people. I want to hear from people that don't want it to happen. If you don't want the Steelers to trade for Davante Adams, tell us why.
There should be a good contingent of that because, like I said, I was seeing quite a bit of that on Twitter. So hopefully we get that in the comments as well with their perspective on it. If you are listening somewhere else, whether that be Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast from, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and subscribe over there. And then you can follow us everywhere. Steelers Afternoon Drive on TikTok. And you can follow me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.